There are two roadblocks here for George Lombard Jr. Oswald Peraza and Oswaldo Cabrera. Now, Cabrera is the lesser important part of this one. I think he's currently favored to win the third base job. I think it's the most likely that he gets the third base job. He is definitely in front of the other two guys. Peraza is the interesting one.
You are Locked On Yankees, your daily New York Yankees podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On Yankees, which is part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks for making us your first listen. I'm your host, Brian McKeon. Stacy is out today, but she'll be with you for a solo Fan Mail Friday tomorrow. Before we get started, don't forget to subscribe to Locked On Yankees on whichever podcasting platform you prefer, and subscribe to our channel on YouTube. Like our videos and hit the bell so you're notified whenever our videos go live. On today's show, there's going to be a new documentary coming out with the Yankees centered around that. There is a trade proposal that was attempted to go through, did not go through, but the Yankees were heavily involved. We're going to discuss that because it was reported earlier yesterday. But first, I want to do a little bit of a deeper dive on George Lombard Jr. and the legitimate chance that he has of making this team and making an impact on the 2025 team. As we all know, he's young. He's 19 years old. He's not going to be 20 until June. And he has kind of taken spring training by storm this year. He's been a great hitter so far. His fielding is exceptional. He can play the positions the Yankees currently have a need of in the infield. And I think as more and more traction is gained on this storyline, the more and more it becomes a legitimate possibility. Years ago, this is 10, 20 years ago, nobody is even considering him to make the major league roster. This wasn't a thing. Guys that were drafted 2 years ago, and he's a former first round pick from the Yankees. Guys that were drafted years and years ago, it took you years to get to the major leagues. It just did. And it was almost as if you could be ready for the major leagues, and they still wouldn't let you come up because it took a while and you had to let guys run their course. Well, now, with the new rules in baseball, with the service time stuff that's there, a lot of teams, if a guy's ready, we'll call him up. And you've seen teams, not hesitate as much. Now, they hesitate a little more pitchers, they tend to. But when it comes to fielders and guys that can make an impact, guys get called up pretty young at this point. One that comes to mind for the Yankees in particular is Anthony Volpe. Anthony Volpe was called up at a really young age. Some people thought a little too young. But he's on this roster and he's made an impact. I mean, Anthony Volpe barely played in AAA at all. He went basically from AA, had an insane camp, and made the roster. And if you remember, going into Anthony Volpe's camp, it was not a guarantee he was going to make the Yankee roster. I don't think anyone really sat there and thought that he was going to make the Yankee roster. And he played his way into that position. There is a legitimate chance here that George Lombard Jr. could do the exact same thing. And Jason Dominguez is wound up doing that too, by the way, because I don't think if Jason Dominguez was an average player, that he'd be on the Yankees at this point, that he would have been called up at the point that he was called up. So I think they're going to give him a legitimate chance. And there are two roadblocks here for George Lombard Jr., Oswald Peraza and Oswaldo Cabrera. Now, Cabrera is the lesser important part of this one. I think he's currently favored to win the third base job. I think it's the most likely that he gets the third base job. He is definitely in front of the other two guys. Peraza is the interesting one. Peraza has been this highly touted prospect for the Yankees for a while now. All you do is hear about him. A lot of teams in Major League Baseball are interested in him. He could be a trade chip. If he's got this legitimate potential, the Yankees have not tried to tap that. They haven't tried to see what he has. And you're now going into a year where he has no options left. You can't send him back down. Once he gets called up to the major leagues this year, that is the last time he will get called up to the Yankees. Because if they try to send him down anytime after that, he is out of options and he will have to clear waivers to be on the Yankees. And since he is a guy that a lot of teams are trying to trade for, he's not going to clear waivers. There's no chance that he'll clear waivers. He'll probably go to the first team that's able to claim him. So you created a little problem for yourself by the amount of times that you called up Peraza and sent him down and called him up and sent him back down and called him up and sent him back down. You've created a problem for yourself now. Now you are in a situation where Peraza better get, either serious play time or he's going to spend the entire year in the minor leagues. But once he gets called up this year, that's it. There's no other option for him. So he has to stay on the major league roster, or you better hope that he clears waivers, which obviously is not going to happen. So that is the little bit of the hiccup in the George Lombard Jr. situation. However, I think the Yankees have proven to in the last few years, they will play the best player. And they owe it to themselves. They owe it to the fan base. They owe it to the guys on this roster that made the World Series last year. You're a World Series contender. You're the favorite in the American League. You won it. You're coming off a pennant last year. You have to be able to put the best player on the field out there. And if George Lombard Jr. currently is that player, then he has to play. I don't care who's in front of him. If it's Peraza, Cabrera, whatever it is, those guys now become trade chips. And I think Cabrera, too, is an option for them just because he moves around the infield a lot. And if DJ LeMahieu is going to be hurt, which it looks like, he's going to miss significant time, Cabrera can move around. Cabrera's got experience playing other positions. So he serves a point on this roster anyway. He's making the roster regardless of what happens. The Peraza thing's a little more interesting. But again, if Lombard Jr. is the better player, he has to play. And you have to give him that opportunity. I know he's 19 years old, but that's not unheard of in baseball anymore. It's just not. The talent, you see it around sports now for sure. The amount of guys that are coming into leagues at unbelievably young ages, that are playing at young ages and making impacts at young ages. Why can't that start to happen in baseball? And the player that this reminded me of the most when it comes to being called up at a young age and making an impact is Ronald Acuna Jr. Now, he was called up at 20 years old. Lombard is 19, but he'll be 20 in June, so he's almost 20 years old. It's not unheard of for players to come up this early, and the problem with Lombard is the fact that he doesn't have a ton of experience. His highest level is high A ball, which isn't crazy. To get him straight to the major leagues is nuts, but he's hitting major league pitching really well in spring training right now. He's killing it in spring training right now. He's got a 333 average, 2 homers, 4 RBIs, a 1.145 OPS, which is nuts. I know he doesn't have a lot of experience when it comes to AA and AAA, but do you need that? If he's hitting the way he's hitting against major league pitching in camp, and I know guys are working on things, and I know guys are trying to figure out their stuff, but he's taking advantage of every opportunity that he's been given. He hasn't seen a lot of time, but in 2023, in all of A ball, that's A ball, high A ball, and rookie ball all combined, he hit 311, which is really, really solid. Last year at Hudson Valley and Tampa, he hit 231. It was a very up and down year. Remember, he was hurt for a period of time, got off to had a little bit of a hot spell, had a little bit of a cold spell. So young players do. We saw it with Anthony Volpe for sure. Acuna was the same way, though, when he was in rookie ball. He hit 269, so about 30 points higher than Lombard. And that was in 2015 in Acuna's playing in rookie ball, which is crazy to think about how long ago that was. That was 10 years ago already. By the end of April 2018, though, Acuna was on the major league roster. So you're talking about Lombard, who was in 2023 playing at high A ball 2 years ago. It took Acuna just about 3 years to get to the major leagues. So maybe Lombard is a year away. Maybe he is at that point. But I don't think at this point, again, talk to the Atlanta Braves. If Acuna was ready at 19, they would have called him up. I mean, the Mets are going to call up his brother this year, and he's going to make an impact on the Mets roster. I think you have to look at what this guy can do for your roster. And I think the point is, too, Lombard fills a hole the Yankees really desperately need fixed at this point. They don't have a third baseman. They don't. If they had the confidence in Cabrera, if they had the confidence in Peraza, and if they didn't think Lombard had a chance of winning this job, I got to tell you something. They would have announced their starting first baseman by now. There is value for these players in knowing where they're going to be at the start of the year, knowing what position they're going to be playing, knowing they can start working on other things and not keep focusing on where their roster spot is. He's not allowed to do that right now. None of these guys that are competing for this job are allowed to do that. All of these guys competing for this job right now are out there trying to win a job, trying to impress, and not focusing on the season coming up necessarily. You announce a starter, it allows them to relax a little bit. They're not doing that. I think there's a reason for that. They know there are options. There could be an outside option they're looking for. But I think they're looking to see, what if Lombard keeps doing this? Ask yourself that question, because Anthony Volpe was just as good in his first spring training, and they had no hesitation in calling him up. So when you look at what Peraza can do, what Cabrera can do, they've both not been, terrific. They haven't been bad, but they haven't been terrific in spring training. And again, it's short into spring training so far. but a 333 average for Lombard, 2 homers, and 2 moonshots, by the way, 4 RBIs, and over an 1100 OPS. Those are the numbers of an elite level player. And I know he's at a young age right now, but he's got the ability to make this roster, and he's been given a legitimate chance by how much playtime he's been given. So we're going to see. It's going to be an interesting breakdown. Me and Stacey are obviously going to be talking about that throughout the rest of spring training because it's going to be a storyline no matter what. We're just going to have to see what the Yankees do because they're going to tell you one way or another with who they play, especially upcoming here. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel, hit the like button on our videos, and hit the notification so that you know when our videos go up. You can also join the Locked On Yankees Insiders Club. That link is in our description. You'll get texts from us. You can text us questions, comments, reactions to trades, and signings. We send out lineups during the season, so you'll get those every single day. We also give you roster moves, breaking news, so you don't have to check social media. There's a 14-day free trial. Coming up next, there was a trade proposal put in for Marcus Stroman sometime in January or December. It was turned down. We'll get into that on the other side. Yeah, so interesting stuff with the Marcus Stroman stuff. If you noticed, a friend of the show, John Heyman, did put out on his account that the Yankees had offered Marcus Stroman to the Giants for Taylor Rogers straight up before he was traded to the Reds, and the Giants turned it down. And I can't blame them, honestly. You look at Marcus Stroman's coming into this year, the Giants, now they could use a starter, absolutely, but Taylor Rogers has had really good numbers over the last few years. Really good numbers out of the bullpen, mid-2s ERA, kind of exactly what the Yankees could have used, to be quite honest with you. At $12 million a year for a top-tier bullpen arm, Yankees would have loved to fit him in their equation. And I think this was turned down for the point that I've been making over the last few weeks. Marcus Stroman has become a very hard player to trade because of what his contract looks like. Everyone keeps saying that he has a 1-year contract, a 1 year left on his deal, actually. He doesn't. It's 2 years. There's a clause in his deal where if he throws more than 140 innings next year, it becomes a player option for the next year at $18 million. Marcus Stroman is not going to get over $18 million in the open market. At his age, and if he stays relatively healthy at $140 million, at 140 innings, he's going to easily surpass that if he's a starter on a team. If he went into the Giants, he'd be a starter. 140 innings is not even a crazy amount of health for a pitcher. He's going to hit that. He's going to have a player option. He's going to take that. Now, he may get over $18 million over the course of a long-term deal if someone would be willing to give that. But you're talking about a pitcher that's in his 30s that teams might be hesitant to give a long-term deal to. $18 million over a year is way more money than he's going to get over an AAV in the future. He's going to hit that 140 inning marker. I don't think that it's a crazy turn down from the Giants. He would be on their starting rotation. It really is a 2-year, $36 million deal. And are the Giants in a position to fit that on their team? The finances become too much of a problem for them. I don't think this deal was structured very well by the Yankees. They gave Marcus Stroman a little too much leeway, especially with the player option at 140 innings. You didn't really give Marcus Stroman a 2-year deal. You really gave him a 3-year deal. And now that's coming back to bite you because you weren't able to make the Taylor Rogers trade. Again, this is a trade rumor that came out from John Heyman yesterday. Apparently this trade rumor was in early January or December, sometime this was offered to. Do you really think that after the World Series ended for all of November and all of December, the Yankees didn't approach any other teams with a trade option? And do you really think in January, when this trade was turned down, they didn't approach other teams for an option? Of course they did. They were trying to make moves. If they tried to trade him once, they were going to continuously try to trade him. The problem with all this is the fact that Marcus Stroman has become untradeable with what his contract looks like, and it's proven it to you. If they've tried with one other team prior, and it's the Giants, there's obviously other teams who have been poked around with. Obviously, the Yankees have reached out to other teams. I'm sure other teams have called the Yankees. The problem here is the contract. They're not going to be able to help financially. And another team is not going to want to pick up 2 years of Marcus Stroman, especially with how he's looked in spring training. I know you might have gotten lucky with the heel injury that Stroman can pitch for you. But have you seen how Will Warren's pitched? With how good Will Warren has been in the spring, he's competing for a job here. And I mentioned it on yesterday's show, and it's going to be a key talking point for us. Marcus Stroman coming into this spring with the attitude of, I'm a starter, I'm starting, I'm not doing anything else. You want a player to come in with a chip on his shoulder. You do. And Marcus Stroman is far from that. Marcus Stroman is coming in as a very, very confident player that, quite frankly, doesn't have a lot of legs to stand on when it comes to confidence right now. You all want a confident athlete. I'm not debating that. But Marcus Stroman's coming off a year where he wasn't good enough to make the playoff roster. And now he's coming into spring spewing out that he is only a starter. He will only start for the Yankees. And that's it. That's a problem. Whereas you have a guy like Will Warren who's still trying to prove something, still trying to prove that he deserves to be in the major leagues. And coming into a year where he did struggle in his rookie year. Now, I don't think Will Warren was necessarily treated properly last year. Right? He came in, was thrown into weird spots, was basically on a taxi squad back and forth all year, filling out for injured guys and filling out roster spots. Some games he looked okay, but wasn't great otherwise. But he went into the lab with Matt Blake this offseason. He's looked fantastic. He's looked like a different player. And quite frankly, he's out there to go take a job. He wants to take the job. And he might get it. He might win this job. And then what do you do with Stroman? Do you eat the salary and dump him off to some team that could use a starter? I'm not sitting here saying that someone doesn't need him, because I do think there is a spot for Marcus Stroman on someone's roster in Major League Baseball. He's a serviceable 3 to 5. 18 million is a lot. 2 years, 18 million is a lot. But he's a serviceable pitcher. So I do think there's, the Yankees might at this point just have to bite the bullet and trade him for almost nothing. Take a low-level prospect that you think you can develop and hope for the best. But at this point, with where Marcus Stroman, the way he's played it, he's not willing to pitch out of the bullpen. The Yankees aren't going to move him there either. Will Warren's pitching really well and vying for a spot on this roster. I don't know what they're going to do. They've handled this offseason pretty well for the most part. They made a lot of really good additions. A lot of reasons to be confident. The Marcus Stroman thing I don't think was handled very well. Even with the Luis heel injury. It doesn't feel like they've handled this well. And now you're going into a year where you have a hole at third base. You're not 100% in left field. And you don't have a number 4, number 5 starter. Either or. Could be a problem. Another news around the league, too. I know this was just clerical. We knew this was going to happen. But Clayton Kershaw got his deal with the Dodgers. 1 year, $7.5 million. It can escalate to $16 million, and it more than likely will, because the escalators are basic things that he's going to hit. It's innings limits. It's that kind of stuff. As long as he stays healthy, which has been a problem for him, he's likely going to hit that $16 million. It feels like Clayton Kershaw's just got a 1 year deal waiting for him every single year with the Dodgers, no matter what he wants. Great for him, honestly. He's got it all made out for him in that sense. Their pitching rotation is ridiculous. He's there like number 7. He's ridiculous. It's ridiculous how good they are. You saw Sasaki's debut the other day in spring training. He looked ridiculous. The fork split that he had going, the movement was incredible. Yamamoto was out there debuting his debuting for the spring, showing off his 12-6 curveball, which is also ridiculous. They're going to have an incredible pitching rotation, one that's really hard to. I mean, Kershaw might not be on the playoff roster like Stroman last year. There's no room for him. The Dodgers are a team that always has injuries at the starting pitching market, so I'm sure some way, somehow, Kershaw will find a way to pitch regularly on this Dodger team. But the abundance of starters that they have is absolutely incredible. It's going to be a fun team to watch. I wonder how how many wins over 100 they're going to have. It feels like a team that could end up getting a little bored with the regular season just because they're so talented and they know it's just about the postseason for them. But it's going to be interesting. Talk about a team that's handled their offseason extremely well in the Los Angeles Dodgers. Speaking of which, in the next segment, I do want to talk about this because it was released earlier today that the Yankees are going to be a part of a documentary that was made during the World Series that we really didn't hear about. It's going to be debuting just before opening day, so that should be a lot of fun. It's going to be on the Yankees and Dodgers. I'll give you guys some information on that on the other side. We'll be back in a little bit. Looking for a snack that's both delicious and nutritious? Crack into a good source of protein with Wonderful Pistachios. Wonderful Pistachios is one of the highest protein nuts. Each 1 ounce serving has 6 grams of protein, giving you over 10% of your daily value. Plus, they're packed with fiber and better for you unsaturated fats to help keep you feeling fuller for longer. Now, personally, I love the no shells variety. It's the perfect grab and go snack for busy days. And whether I'm snacking at my desk, on a road trip, or just need a quick protein boost, they're always my go-to. And if you love cracking open every shell for that satisfying crunch, the in-shell options are also a classic favorite. Wonderful Pistachios is a complete protein, providing all 9 essential amino acids. Whether you're running between meetings or dropping off the kids, Wonderful Pistachios are the snack that works as hard as you do. So get snacking and get cracking with the snack that packs a protein punch. Visit wonderfulpistachios.com to learn more. So this Yankee-Dodger documentary series, it was announced earlier, 2024, it'll document the World Series, but really it'll document both teams' playoff runs. Apparently, the camera started following every team. When you were eliminated, they stopped following you, but it'll focus on the Yankees and the Dodgers. It's coming out March 28th on Apple TV. This is really awesome because you've seen a lot of these insider sports documentaries come out over the last few years, and the NHL obviously did a terrific one with the Toronto Maple Leafs. They really went inside the Leafs locker room, followed them throughout the season. You saw a lot of how the training regimens go, the nutrition. That was really fascinating, at least for me, a guy that's really into the inside of sports. It was awesome. Amazon did that with them. You've seen Apple do it with the MLS, with Messi, with the World Cup runs. They've really gotten an inside scoop on what these teams are going for. Obviously, NFL Hard Knocks has been a huge deal for years. HBO has really set the gold standard for how that's done. And this is the first one you're now getting with Major League Baseball. The teams have allowed it. They've allowed the cameras to be inside the clubhouse. The players are really for it. They've done interviews throughout the postseason. That's also really cool to see. It's going to be a 3-part documentary series too, which I think is really cool. I'm assuming it's going to be about an hour each episode. Probably pretty easy to fly through, but it'll be out on Apple TV right during opening day, actually. I'm a fan of this. A lot of teams do this kind of stuff. It happens around the league, around all different sports leagues. It's cool. It does show insider stuff. And it's going to have interviews with players, coaches, fans, and players' family members, which I think is another really cool aspect of things too, just to see what these families go through playoff runs. I'm sure it'll show some of the family members in suites at World Series games, panicking, going through similar feelings that I'm sure all of us went through as Yankee fans. I think it'll be a really cool insider scoop. I'm wondering what players they're going to get a lot out of. I'm assuming Mookie Betts you'll certainly hear from because he's big on doing a lot of media outside. I wonder what other players you're going to hear a lot from, though. I wonder how much access Aaron Judge gave, because Aaron Judge is one of those guys who often is pretty quiet, not a huge bombastic speaker out there, and yet he might have given some access to this because I think he's in the interest of growing the game, just like Garrett Cole. I think Garrett Cole will probably be a factor in this. Also, I wonder how much players wanted to be involved in this, seeing that, you're going into a really, this is a World Series appearance, right? This is a pennant. This is the first one the Yankees have won in this kind of era of Yankee baseball. So I do think there's a little bit to how focused were they and if the cameras affected anything. Now, it didn't affect the Dodgers' performance, that's for sure. But I do think having constant documentary guys following that didn't hurt the Yankees throughout the entire postseason that they played. But it could have affected them in the World Series. I'm sure we'll see. Well, I'm sure you'll hear more about it when they ask players about it through spring training. But this is really cool to get an inside scoop. It's, be grateful as a Yankee fan they made the World Series, because it's really cool to get an inside scoop on your team throughout the postseason. The coolest thing about it, too, one of the executive producers of this is Derek Jeter. His company, which is called Cap2 Productions, was one of the production companies in charge of this. So I'm sure Derek Jeter was probably given a little bit of a say with the players, and probably made it a little more player friendly to what the players would like a little more. I mean, there's certainly no player with more experience when it comes to what you can and can't deal with during a World Series than Derek Jeter. So I like the fact that he was in charge of this. I like the fact that he was one of the producers of this. He was on top of it back and forth. That'll be really cool to see. But this is interesting that baseball's allowing this, because you don't see a lot of this going on. I think they're trying over the years to get more camera crews involved, get more social media engagement, get the players a little more involved. But I can't imagine Yankee players weren't super involved in this, because baseball players have been trying to open up about this kind of stuff over the last few years, trying to gain fan interest, especially when it comes to social media. This will do that. A documentary series like this, going through the postseason, having a kind of Hard Knocks feel to it, is really cool. And I think it's something that will work for Major League Baseball. Well, so it's cool to see the Yankees agreeing to that. It's cool to see the Dodgers agreeing to that. This is going to be a really cool series. If you have Apple TV, you probably should have it anyway as a Yankee fan, because they do play a lot of games. The Wednesday night games a lot of times are on there. So you're going to have to catch a lot of those on Apple TV this year. They do have an MLB package. So, yeah, this is a really cool story. The Toronto Maple Leafs did one a few years ago, and they actually followed them through the season. And I wonder how aggravating that could have been for the players, just because of nutritional wise. They were really inside the clubhouse for that team. They followed them on the road, and I wonder how annoying that can get over times. And again, I wonder if it was a little bit of a distraction, because having these cameras around when they haven't been around in years past, following you through the clubhouse, following you on the road trip back and forth to LA, asking you questions, asking your family questions. Not really stuff that baseball players usually want to deal with, but hey, they all agreed to it. They were all down for it, and we'll see. So it comes out March 28th. It'll be on Apple TV, and it's a 3-part documentary series about the Yankee-Dodger World Series from last year. A reminder, Stacy's got you for Fan Mail Friday. Tomorrow it'll be a solo venture for her, because I'll be in Vegas over the weekend. And then I'll be back on Monday for you guys throughout all of next week. We are inching closer and closer to spring training. So, I mean, to spring training being over and to this regular season starting. It really is crazy how we're that close. And it feels like the season ended so recently last year, and yet we're back already. A lot of news to break down, a lot of things to discuss. We're going to keep our eyes on that George Lombard Jr. story and Spencer Jones, see if he winds up staying hot and keeping and maybe making a chance for himself to get. I don't think he will, but I mean, who knows? Crazier stuff has happened before. So I want to thank you for making Locked On Yankees your first listen today. And for your second listen, make sure you check out the Locked On Fantasy Baseball podcast with hosts Dominic Martino and Matthew Ane. MLB Fantasy Draft season is here. Be the most informed fan and set yourself up for a league win. You can find Locked On Fantasy Baseball on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcast. That'll do it for this edition of Locked On Yankees. I'm Brian McKeon. Stacy will catch you for Fan Mail Friday tomorrow.